my slides go. Okay. So we are recording, and that is so that if anybody does miss the session, they can catch up on the recording. And also you can go back and recheck things. And if you want to, delve into something a little bit more. Kathy, over to you. Who are you? You're on mute.
It's a good question. Thank you, Ken. So I'm Kathy DeCouris, and I'm the training manager here at Safe System Solutions. I'm your person in the background. So I've been in road-related training for, I don't know, 17 or 18 years now, which is really frightening. I've got a teaching background, and I spent a long time after that working for the Australian Road Research Board, or ARB Group. And for the last 5 or 6 years, I've been here at Safe System Solutions and helping Ken deliver a whole bunch of road safety related training. So I'm your person in the background. Contact me if you can't make a session, if you have any technical issues or anything like that. This is the webinar version of Zoom, so you can talk to us via typing in your message via the chat, which many of you have already done. You can or you can use the Q&A to type a question anonymously if you don't want to be known for your controversial questions. You can raise your hand and we can unmute you so that we can hear you if you'd like to ask a question verbally or audially. Now, if everything fails, the best thing to do is to shut down and rejoin. That usually fixes most problems, or otherwise flick me an email in the background and I'll help you sort things out.
Yeah, and if for some reason you aren't seeing the chat, which occasionally happens, you can use the Q&A, but the chat is the preferred. What's this learning management system?
Yeah, fandangled things. So for those of you who've been to university in the last little bit, you may be familiar with this. It's basically an online learning management system where we house everything that we use throughout the course. So a copy of the presentation notes is in here, any quizzes that you need to do, as well as your assignment documentation. So this is basically everything that you need to help you complete the course. You have been sent an email from Safe System Solutions, and that has your login and password. If you haven't jumped on there just yet, just again, flick me an email and I'll make sure you're set up from there, and do check your spam folder in case it has gone to spam. For those of you who've done the module 1, 2, and 3 of this particular program, Safe System Principles, a month or 2 ago, you'd be familiar with this. For those of you who did some training in person in Goulburn, this will be nice and fresh and new to you. And I'm just gonna, Blair's already got his hand up. So Blair, I'm asking you to unmute.
Yeah.
You've got a question?
Yeah, with that learning management system, I did see the first email come through, but it did say there'd be a follow-up email with our login details. I don't think I've seen that one. So
yeah, that's probably the one that's gone to spam for you. So okay. I'll reset you up. No dramas.
No, I can go in and have a look, or is it a timing thing?
No, it should be fine if you do. But yeah, Transport for New South Wales is very strong on their firewalls and so on. So yeah, no.
And I'll just add to that, for those that weren't at Goulburn, we did a sort of refresher presentation yesterday.
Oh, great.
Which pretty much went over Ken's slides in that as well. So everyone should be pretty familiar with what we discussed in that sort of first
Terrific.
session.
All right, lovely. Thank you, Blair. Appreciate it.
Cheers.
Just mute you again in case there's any more chatter in the background. All right, so I think that's good. Ken, next slide, please. Oh, Wally. So Wally the Wombat appears occasionally throughout the presentation, and you need to stay attentive and count the number of Wallies that will be in the quiz at the end of the module, which is in the learning management system. So do watch out for Wally throughout the presentation. What else do we have? Oh, that's right. And you win prizes. There's a bit of warm-up trivia that we spent a bit of extra time on today, but we'd really like you to be involved. So do get in there and answer questions when Ken asks them. Ask terrific questions, thoughtful ones that you've pondered. volunteer during case studies, put your hand up to talk about something, and arrive early to a session. And there'll be some warm-up trivia. So, and we'll post you the I was going to call them the presents. Well, it is coming up to Christmas. Oh, socks. Andy would like some socks.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, good. We've got some new merch too, by the way. We post them to you after the series has ended, once you've successfully completed. So we'll only get your prizes if you do your assignment. So that's part of the carrot there to get your assignment in too. All right. I think we are good. And it sounds like, so we've got a mix of people from the first 3 modules online. So some of you have already seen this. Some of you came to the Goulburn session. We've got a good mix of people, but everyone is from New South Wales. And I think we might be good to go, Ken. Do we want to do a recap, or do you think we might be stretching it for time today?
No, I think we can do a recap. I can move fairly quickly. If you got a 5-minute recap.
All right, let's give it a crack. Okay, so 5-minute recap. What we're going to do is, now you can do this on your phone or on your computer. So basically, this is a quick Menti. So you actually go to menti.com and you use the code 72978412. And we're just going to do a very quick and fun, road safety is fun, isn't it? Recap. So might actually pop that into the chat as well. Okay, great. We have at least 1 player, 2 players. Oh, this is excellent. All right. Oh, lovely. Everyone is on board. So what's going to happen is I'm sharing my screen, but you'll have your own screen, whether it's on your phone or on your computer nearby. And we are going to hit start in just another minute or so. And we're just doing a bit of a recap of the first 3 sessions, because I know it was a little bit of time ago. So I think we might go with question 1. Okay, and the faster you answer, the more points you get. Roundabouts have fewer conflict points compared to a signalised intersection. Is it true or is it false? True or false? Running out of time. We made it very quick. Ooh. The majority said true. Well done. You're,
It is true.
it is. Yes, it is true. And oh, here's the leaderboard. Source looks like they might be getting some socks.
More questions to come.
More questions to come. Yes, not question 2 is, yeah. There we go. At what speed is there a 10% chance of death for a right angle crash between passenger vehicles? At what speed? Time's up. It is 50 Ks. Again, the majority got that one. All right, we're just going to keep powering through. So question 3. Blocking vehicle access to create a pedestrian precinct will influence. Is it road user exposure, crash likelihood, or crash severity? Blocking vehicle access to create a pedestrian precinct will influence which one of those? Exposure. Good, good. Looks like we've got our exposure, likelihood, severities sorted, Ken, which is good. It's pleasing. The safe system speed for vulnerable road users, people who walk, cycle or motorcycle, is less than what? Oh, okay. Right. Is this good, Ken? You happy? Oh, quick leaderboard check.
Things are changing.
No, sources. No, Mal. Zoe, very fast on your tail. Paul, Kelly, sources dropped right off.
Anybody can win this still, I think.
All right, so we've got 2 questions left. Five considerations when evaluating the safety for motorcyclists include sight, surface, signs, strike, and which other S? Very good. Very good. That is correct. Last question. So this is it. The speed environment influences a crashes. Is it likelihood, severity, exposure, likelihood and severity, or exposure, likelihood and severity?
Good question.
Oh, interesting. Severity was it a trick question? Maybe it was a trick question. Okay, here we go. And the winner is?
Oh, this will be close.
This is very close. Oh, Mel. Well done, Mel. You have to tell me in the chat who you really are, and you'll get a prize. Well done.
Excellent. Oh, well, that was a good recap. Nice way to do that. And a number of important things in there that we are going to be sort of delving into. And the big one was, oh, I'm going to go back a bit, that exposure, likelihood and severity. But let's go back to here. And there's a Wally for those who are keeping count. Oh, jumping around there. Sorry, Wally made me sneeze. Okay, so this module, what we're going to dive into now is talking about safe system assessments and some guidelines around those. But how do you actually do these assessments? And it's a fairly straightforward process, but I'm going to give you a few tips. And then we're getting ready for you to go out and do a little mock safe system assessment. Kathy will take you through that at the end, but we've got a site close to your home or your office or whatever, wherever it was convenient for you. And we're going to get you to do a bit of safe system assessing. And you'll understand then what goes into a safe system assessment report. And we'll have a look at treatments and categorizing those into primary and supporting treatments. So yeah, do keep those questions coming in the chat. Type them in as you think of them rather than waiting for me to stop and say, does anybody have any questions? Because I'll have moved on by the time you type it and the like. And so we're going to keep moving forward. So we did some great discussion either in person or in the online modules around the safe system and what are those principles and what are the elements of the safe system, how are we thinking about road safety. And we've got ourselves in a nice position there of understanding that, but it's about how do we now make an assessment of an infrastructure project or another initiative to understand how well it aligns with these principles. And the safe system assessment framework's a really neat way to do that. And it is all based on this idea of exposure times likelihood times severity. And some of you did quite a bit of thinking around this, exposure, likelihood, and severity. And some of you, I think, still need to refine your thinking a little bit. But exposure is like the number. it's a number. The number of road users exposed to a certain crash type. So that could be the number of vehicles, could be the number of pedestrians, the number of cyclists. It's all about a number. The likelihood of crash, well, that's associated with a whole lot of things that reduce, the chance that a crash will happen. So warning signs, line marking, audio tactile, edge line, center line, sealed shoulders. These are all lessening the chance of a crash, okay? The severity is determined by only a few sort of key variables: speed, angle of impact if it's passenger vehicles, the vulnerability of the user involved. They're the big ones. So what we do in a safe system assessment is we actually quantify, we put a number to each of these for different crash types. And that's what I'll be taking you through today. And then we'll send you out to do that. We looked at these curves, the fatality probability curves for different crash types. That gave us a bit of grounding for understanding human tolerance to physical force. How bad is the outcome going to be of different crash types? And we're going to need that information and that data for us to be able to put in a number to our safe system assessment matrix, which I'll get to. I did show this to all the groups. Some I sort of dwelled on it a little bit, and some I sort of moved past it and said, well, we'll cover this off in module 4 and when you get into safe system assessing. And that's now, so we better cover it off. So what we've got here is this idea that we've got a vehicle's speed, and then we've got all these different crash types that could happen. And they're going to be more severe or less severe depending on the speeds and which crash type it is. And in the safe system assessment, we need to give it a score between a 0 and a 4. And so we can start to think about, okay, if a car hits a cyclist at 40 kilometers per hour, it is a different color there because I'm going red onto red there. 40 kilometers per hour. We know we're sort of going to be in this fairly serious range, and that a score of around 3 is applicable for that. We know if it happens at 80 kilometers per hour, we know that's going to be very much in that 4, very bad category. We know if it happens at sort of 20, we're in a much better position here, not absolutely free of risk, but much better. So you can see that for a select or a number of crash types. Now, the challenge you're going to have is that when you go out and you look at a site and a design is there, you've got to try to understand, well, what speed do we think these crashes might happen at? And so you're going to make a prediction based on the speed limit and what you think operating speeds will be. And you will also have crash types that don't appear there. You might think of a crash type or see a crash type that isn't there. So you're going to have to use your judgment as to, well, what do I think the severity of that will be? And I'll give you some further guidance on this. But you will be needing to come back to this when you do your safe system assessments for you to get some good clarity around this 1 or 2 or 3 or 4. Now, Kathy.
Just quickly, Ken, are we looking at cyclist speed or car speed?
Great question. So this is all based on the car speed or the speed of the bullet vehicle, if that makes sense. So I think I don't think we've got anything in there where there'd be an odd bullet vehicle being the one that does the damage. Yeah, it is the car speed in all of them, except for maybe head-ons when we're getting heavy vehicles versus cars. You've got to sort of do a delta V on that. So it depends mass and, you know, the vehicle going back. But generally, you're sort of talking about operating speeds of the road for vehicles. Good question. Thank you. Give a prize to that person. I don't know. Okay. So I think I can just dive straight into showing you how to do a safe system assessment. And like anything in life, really, isn't it? The best way to learn how to do it is to get out and have a go at one, and then see where you don't understand things, ask questions, and yeah, have a go at it. But I'll walk you through, and then we'll give you all the info you need. Kathy, we did have a little poll, or we may not have a poll. I'm not sure. No poll. That's okay.
No, no polls. Sorry about that.
That's okay. I was really just interested in whether people had any experience with this safe system assessment framework, but it doesn't really matter, because I'm going to go from very base level to cover off. So Austroads late 2016 released the Safe System Assessment Framework, and that's this document freely available from the Austroads website. And why did they do that? Well, there was a lot of jurisdictions who are committed to this idea of the safe system approach to road safety, and everybody was out there saying, oh, well, we must do safe system, and then there were people saying, oh, we can't do that, it's not safe system, or this is a safe system project, or this is a safe system program. And it was sort of this very unclear, what actually is this, and how do you judge whether something is aligned well with safe system principles or not? And so Austroads said, well, surely we can come up with some sort of methodology to get a bit of an understanding of how well things do align with these principles of the safe system, and what we could do to make them better aligned. And so this project was developed and then released, and it was put out there. There weren't many people doing anything like this around Australia and New Zealand. Myself and a colleague were doing things we called a safe system audit, which was, they used, so the project team for this used a fair bit of the work we'd been doing to try to conjure this up. I wasn't one of the authors of this. I was on the working group, but yeah, so there used to be that, but really it was kind of put down without a lot of people having done it. So as a result of that, there were a few things when we've been rolling out a lot of safe system assessments using this framework that just needed a bit of adjustment. And so some jurisdictions have put out supplementary guidance, and we've clarified a few things and tried to help people along. But I'm going to jump, well, the sections we've got here is saying, well, what is the objective of the assessment? You know, how in-depth do we want this assessment to be? Then what's the context of the project that is happening? And this is predominantly done on infrastructure projects, the planning upgrades to an intersection, a length of road, or new roads being planned, or new bus interchange, or something like that. But you then sort of understand, well, what are the project objectives, the function of the road, the speed environment that's going to be created, road users that are present, different vehicles and the like. Then we get into this safe system assessment matrix, and that's the meat of a safe system assessment. It's where we spend most of our time in the assessment, is pondering bits and pieces in there. And you can see in there exposure, likelihood and severity, and other safe system pillars or elements. So we do have a bit of wider thinking about the implications of infrastructure on other elements of the safe system, the people, the speeds, well, speeds are sort of integrated into this very much, and people are integrated in, except for I'm talking more about whether we can piggyback with behavioural interventions and other educational activities or the like. So that more traditional safe people element, and the vehicles and any post-crash care related thinking. And then we come up with some ideas to improve things, improve this project, make it better, make it more in that transformational space and or supporting. So I'll take you through it. I'll take you through an example. So the two jurisdictions, South Australia and Victoria, that put out supplementary guidelines that sit under the Austroads document, clarified a few things. It just didn't quite work in practice. Also set some requirements in those states for doing safe system assessments. That's now in your road safety plan, the requirement for safe system assessments to be done on infrastructure projects. So, you know, it's very much a genuine assessment technique that is used for infrastructure designs, development, planning of projects. And what I thought I'd do is I'd jump right to the end. One of the outputs that you see in a safe system assessment looks like this. What that is a score on the side here that says safe system alignment score. And across the bottom here, we see crash types: run-off road, head-on, intersection, other, pedestrian, cyclist, motorcyclist. Now, I'll explain these in a bit more detail in the next slide, but what we're saying here is this is the crash risk, and the lower the score, the better. So the lower each of these bars, the better. The red here represents the existing condition. And then it looks like we've got 3 different upgrade scenarios that have been put forward. And so we would have been given a design of a roundabout, a design of a modified T intersection with traffic signals in blue, or a conventional T intersection with traffic signals in grey. And so we can see fairly immediately from this information where things improve crash types or where things make things possibly worse. So, for example, there for cyclists, the roundabout seems to make things a bit worse for cycle crashes, but improves things across others. So you can immediately see that you can get some intel and information from this. So how do we get ourselves to this point? And that's what I'm going to spend the next bit of time going through. Well, first and foremost, you want to understand aspects of the project, which are going to help inform your scoring. And Austroads put into the Safe System Assessment Framework these prompt questions. And so if you're doing a safe system assessment, you start with these and you ask whoever the project team is, the designer or the project manager or whoever, you ask these questions around, well, why is this project happening? Are there specific issues that are being addressed? What's the traffic growth? Is it freight area? Then you get into, well, what is the function of the road? What's the land use, speed limits, intersections that are going to stay, that exist, what's happening upstream, downstream. You could ask other questions to gain this context of what's going on. You'd be looking at movement and place assessments if they've been done, or understanding what the aspirations are of the area. What's the speed environment? More questions around speed. What road users are present, or what road users are expected to be present. we've got elderly or children or like, and what is the vehicle composition? And we've got lots of heavy vehicles or motorcyclists or others. So you're asking all these questions to gather context, to get an understanding. A lot of the time in safe system assessments, the assessment team will come and will and ask in a maybe short workshop about the project, ask all these questions. The plans will be put up, the designs, questions around, well, what's happening in this bit, what are any ideas here, and all of this is gathered. Because then you get into going out and assessing. So you'll look at the site, you'll look at the designs, and you come up to start to try to do an assessment using this matrix or table, you could call it, you know. And you'll see here that the rows of this are exposure, likelihood, and severity. And that's good. That's good because we've been talking about those. And what we do is we put a score 0 to 4 in each cell of this matrix, in each square. So the first thing you do is the existing conditions. You go out there, you look at what's existing there now before they do any upgrades or anything like that, or even looking at the plans, and you say, okay, I'm going to score this area. I'm going to make an assessment of this area as it exists. If you're looking at an intersection, for example, you'll be looking at what is currently there. And there might be an upgrade plan to put a roundabout in, or a set of traffic signals, or splitter islands, or whatever it is. Okay, but you're just looking at what is there at the moment. We'll get to those plans. Okay, so the crash types are runoff road, and that is for passenger vehicles or heavy vehicles. So vehicles leaving the road and striking things. Head-on, again, vehicle to vehicle head-on crashes where vehicles cross the center line and hit each other. Intersection crashes, and this is where any road user is crossing or turning at an intersection. Sorry, it's any vehicle to vehicle crashes. Okay, we'll cover off pedestrians and cyclists shortly. Vehicle to vehicle crashes at an intersection. They have to be making that turn movement or that straight through movement. Pedestrian crashes, I've jumped over other. Pedestrian crashes are any crash where the pedestrian is the one that is injured. The pedestrian is the target vehicle or the target. So if a pedestrian is struck at an intersection, that we think about in this category, not intersection, okay? Cyclist, again, if a cyclist is the one that's injured in your prediction, then it goes into cyclist. So if a vehicle runs off the road and hits a cyclist, okay, that is in cyclist, assuming they don't injure themselves in the vehicle occupant, it's just cyclist. Motorcyclist, again, it's the motorcyclist being the one that's injured. So it could be run off road, head on, could be intersection. Pretty unlikely that it'd be motorcyclist hitting pedestrian or cyclist where the motorcyclist is the one injured, but it could happen. The other category sits there to capture anything that is not adequately captured in these other categories of crash. So that often is railway level crossing crashes, crashes with light rail, side swipe crashes could occur in there. A rear end crash, but only if it's not generated from an intersection. This was quite a bit of debate across Australia as to whether a rear-end crash from an intersection should be categorised as an other or an intersection. It was decided that it should go into an intersection crash if it's been generated from intersection signals or interaction. But if it's at a mid-block location for some reason, that would be an other. Okay, so they're the sort of crash types. And for those of you that have spent time looking at crash data and crash information, you'll be familiar with your RUM codes, road user movement codes, and the categorization of those and into different sort of themes. And these sort of align up with that. So for those familiar with that, you can think about a little bit this way as well. So the first thing we want to do is understand and quantify, put numbers to, the exposure to each of these crash types. And so we've got to think about the road we're looking at and say, how many people are exposed to running off the road? And the answer to that is, what is your annual average daily traffic, your traffic volume? Okay, so let's say we've got a traffic volume of 4,000. Put 4,000 in there, except for 4,000 is not between 0 and 4, which is what we have to do. So what we do is we go to a scoring reference sheet. And I've sort of recreated the scoring reference sheet here from Austroads. And it says, here's your score. We've got a 0 or 1. Go down here, we've got a 2, a 3, and a 4. And you've got exposure here. So you've got a definition. So let's look at what a 4 would be for exposure. Volumes of vehicles that might be involved in a particular crash type are very high, or the road is very low. Therefore, exposure is very high. For run-off road, head-on, and other crash types, AADT is greater than 10,000 vehicles per day. Greater than 10,000 vehicles a day. For cyclists, pedestrians, and motorcycle crash types, volumes are greater than 100 units per day. Okay. Well, we've got 4,000. So we're not greater than 10,000, are we? So it's not a 4. So let's go to a 3. We've got the same thing. Volume of vehicles in my particular crash type are high, therefore exposure is high. Run off road, head on, AD between 5,000 and 10,000 vehicles a day. Okay, we haven't got that either. And 50 to 100 for our vulnerable road users. Let's go to a 2. Okay, between 1,000 and 5,000. Okay, that's what we're looking at. So we go back here and we can simply put in a 2 because it's very clear cut for exposure. If you have traffic volume, you simply look at the scoring reference sheet and you put your number in based on that. And we say, okay, well, how many are exposed to head-on crashes? Now, the road, if it's undivided, well, it's 4,000. If you've got divided road, it's still 4,000 unless there's physical separation in the middle. And we're talking like barrier systems that you don't believe will be breached by the vehicles that are going to be using that road. So most often your runoff road and your head-on are the same. And it's a 2 because it's the same scoring reference sheet that you use. Then we look at intersections. Now, for intersections, we add the approach volumes. So if we have the road we're looking at has 4,000 vehicles per day, and maybe the side road has 1,500 vehicles a day. So what we do is we add those up. So we've got 4,000 plus 1,500. And so we've got 5,500 vehicles a day. And if we go to our scoring reference sheet, well, that ticks it over to a 3, doesn't it? Give that a 3 there for exposure. Then we look at our other crash types and we say, well, what are we thinking about here? And we'll be thinking about a variety of things probably. So we're going to be fairly dominated by our 4,000 again. And mostly this is always 4,000. Sorry, this is always the same as your AADT. And so that'll be a 2 again. Then we get to pedestrians. And this is the number of pedestrians crossing the road or being exposed to these crashes. Now, in my experience here, we get pretty great traffic volume usually for these assessments, and we get very poor pedestrian counts. Like it's quite rare that we get pedestrian counts. I think there's a lot about a lot of things, but you may have to make a judgment call on this yourself when you're out there and knowing the area or not knowing the area and looking and asking around. And this is where you might have to go and look here and say, okay, for cyclist, pedestrian crash and motorcyclist crash types between 10 and 50. Am I predicting it's there? Maybe I'll go back 1. Okay, we think it's, is it less than 10 crossing? Well, you might have a rural location. You might be thinking, yeah, there's hardly any pedestrians here. Maybe occasionally there's 1 or 2 coming out of a farm, walking a dog or something, or the like, but it's really very low. So I'm going to give it a 1. Right? If you got pedestrian counts, great. You're able to be more specific than it. Often the same with cyclists, but we've got this area. We're saying it's rural. It's very low cyclist volume. We get a 1 there. And motorcyclists. Again, you're often not given great data information about motorcycle numbers, but you can often use 1% of AADT, 1 maybe to 2%, unless it's a popular motorcycle area or a route, which would give us a 2 there, sitting in that range here between 10 to 50. Okay, so all of a sudden, based on understanding traffic volumes, the number of pedestrians, the number of cyclists in the area, number of motorcyclists in the area, we've been able to put some numbers to our exposure. And I'll pause there, Kathy, and see if anybody's got any questions before I get into the likelihood.
Certainly do, Ken. So how does the Safe System approach or matrix deal with suicides? Or does it deal with suicides?
So it doesn't. So what we're doing is an assessment and predicting future death and serious injury associated with road transport that we would put onto our numbers of deaths associated with the road network and number of serious injuries associated with the road network. So suicides are taken out of the numbers that we report, the number of people killed on New South Wales roads. Suicides, if it can be proven as a suicide, it is taken off those numbers, as are acts of terrorism taken out of those numbers. So what we're trying to understand is how do we create a road network free of death and serious injury, which is not intentional death or serious injury. Somebody's not gone out to kill themselves or others. Now, it does bring up an interesting point, is why? Well, why do we not include those? And some of the jurisdictions in Europe have started including it and saying, well, that's, you know, drawing these or these magical lines for some reason that death's okay and those ones are not. I suppose we justify it in Australia or in New South Wales by saying, well, you know, there's very significantly different ways that we would approach trying to address, you know, address this outcome if it's a thing that somebody's intending for it to happen versus something that they didn't intend to happen. But yeah, it's a fair question. So I hope that answers that.
And there was a question earlier about when you say road functionality. So it was a couple of slides ago. Are you talking about arterial, arterial, collector, local? This was in the movement and place bit, the prompts.
Yeah. Yeah. So don't take these as more than just sort of prompt questions. So yeah, you don't need to ask these questions, but what you're trying to gather is a rich understanding of what is this road environment? What is this land use area? What are they proposing? Why are they proposing it? What are the characteristics of this area? And you do that to help you be able to put scores into this matrix. But more importantly, I find, is for you to come up with ideas, recommendations for alterations to the project that align with what their aspirations are. If their aspiration and their sole focus is to move cars through an area as quickly as possible, and you as a safe system assessor come in and say, well, we think that there should be raised platforms, speed limits of 30 kilometers an hour, things. Hey, you're aligning with safe system principles really well, but the project ain't going to do it because it's not aligning with the objectives of that project. You can still do things that will get high alignment with safe system principles, right? It could be blocking off access to pedestrians. It could be continuous barrier systems, it could be pedestrian overpasses. It could be, you know, all these sorts of things where the objectives of that project still are retained and you get the high alignment with safe system principles. So that's why you're trying to understand this context. And yeah, knowing what its road function is, whether it's, you know, arterial or local, and where it sits in a movement or place categorization accordingly is pretty important to that. So hopefully that helps.
Thank you.
We'll give people a 2-minute break shortly. Just have a stretch, but I'm going to go through the likelihood one now. So what you next have to do is try to get to a point where you've got enough confidence after looking at the site that you can put a score to the likelihood. And so you're going to actually dot point things that you see at your intersection or your length of road that influence the likelihood of crashes. So there's some examples in here that say, you know, things like the speed, the geometry, the presence of shoulders or not, the presence of barriers or not, the offset of any hazards or the like, how well it's line marked and signed and the like. So they're just some of the things, some thought starters for you. But you'll look at this area and you will dot point a whole lot of things. You might say, well, it's got sealed shoulders and it's got audio tactile edge line and it's got good delineation. So it's got guideposts, it's got cams, chevron alignment markers around curves, but it does have a curve there. So that's going to increase the likelihood of crashes. And And then you go, well, the surface is, oh, that's quite well sealed. And you're just looking at this road environment and collecting lots of thoughts on things that influence the chance that somebody will run off the road. Is this out in the middle of nowhere? So people are more likely to be, fatigued, or is this in the inner city area where they're going to be alert and the like? Those are influencing the chance of a run-off road crash. So you sort of gather a whole lot of information, dot point a whole lot of things in there, and you go to your scoring reference sheet and you say, okay, let's have a look at the likelihood of crash. Let's see what some numbers are saying here. Let's go to a 4. The likelihood of individual road user error leading to a crash is high, given the infrastructure in place, e.g. a high approach speed to a sharp curve, priority movement control, filtering right turn across several opposing lanes, high speed. Okay. So we're seeing for a 4 some significant deficiencies in the physical infrastructure, some creation of situations that we know are going to seriously increase the chance of a crash. So vehicles trying to make their own judgment call to turn over several lanes of traffic as to when that's appropriate or not, and these sorts of things. High speed, maybe you're looking at the crossfall of the road, the camber of curves and these sorts of things. Let's go down to a 3 though and see what it says. It is likely that a given crash type will occur. A 2 is it is unlikely. Gee, we don't get much guidance and information here, do we? This is what Austrades has sort of given. Oh, sorry. For a 1, highly unlikely. Okay. Now, you probably notice I'm ignoring 0 at the moment. I'll come back to it. So you've factored all this in, you've dot pointed lots of your thoughts down, and then you need to make a judgment of the chance of crash between 0, which says, hand on heart, there will never be a crash here, right? 2, 4, which is saying there are significant factors in the road environment that are encouraging crashes to a degree or are really making this highly problematic. And so you end up putting a score in there. Maybe you put a 2 in because you say, well, I've looked at all of this and I've made a judgment call that it's unlikely that a given crash type will occur because we've got sealed shoulders, we've got a speed of 60 kilometers an hour, and we've got audio tactile edge line, great delineation, great surface. However, there's people going to fall asleep and be texting, and so I've got to factor in that. Can't say that they're all going to stay on the road. And then we've got hazards at maybe a 3 meter offset, so they're fairly close. So you're factoring all of this in, and you make that call. Then you do the same for head-on, and it's going to be similar things for head-on. They're both lane departure type crashes, but you're looking at the geometry. But then here you're going to look at that separation. Now I said, before that even if it's got a physical median, okay, if it doesn't have like a barrier in the middle and fairly rigid barrier or something that's going to contain vehicles pretty well, you're still going to assume that it's got exposure to this crash type. So maybe we do have a small median with barrier curb. So you've got curbing there, but no road safety barrier in the middle. So you'd say, well, actually, that's significantly going to reduce the chance of a head-on crash. Okay, we've got that straight geometry, but we've got that curve in there, so that's interesting. Good delineation, good guidance. 60K, which is going to be, they're going to be unlikely to sort of lose control at high speed and yaw and the like. So maybe I'm okay to go down to a 1 for that head-on crash. Highly unlikely. Now you would dot point all of those things in your matrix that you're thinking about. Then you go to intersection. You do the same. You're thinking about, okay, what does this intersection control? Okay, we've got a give way sign. So it's passively controlled, thinking about the speed of vehicles approaching. Okay, is it got good sight distance, conflict points, visibility? You go through all of that and you say, well, actually, with those specific characteristics, I'm going to say it's likely that a given crash type will occur. Now, remember on this, you have already accounted for the volume of traffic. Okay, you get that out. The only reason you would potentially factor volume in again as another factoring in would be if it's really just taking ages and ages to get out to find a gap. Okay, but not the chance of the crash happening because of just lots of people, because that's already covered up in the exposure. Then you think about your other crash type, your side swipes, your rear ends, mid-block created or whatever it is, and you go through the same process, dot point, maybe put a 2 there. Then you get to pedestrians and you say, well, okay, we've established that there aren't many pedestrians here at all. However, that's already been accounted for. So we've got to look at, well, what features are there for pedestrians to cross the road? Are there anything? Is it clear sight lines for a pedestrian? And do we have good sight distance to places they would cross? Is it well lit? And all of these sorts of things. So you look through that, and usually if you've put a 1 up here, you're going to have a fairly high score in the likelihood, because most of the time a jurisdiction would not have invested in significant facilities if there's very low pedestrian volumes. It's kind of the way it works out. And it's often the same for cyclists. Okay, they've got that sealed shoulder to work with, but there's no other facilities. And motorcyclists tend to, they're affected by all these different things within the others, and they're smaller and they're easier to miss by motorists at intersections, and so they end up often becoming quite a highly scoring one. So there we go. We've got to now some scores for likelihood. And of course, if you're doing this properly, which you will be shortly, you are going to have to dot point some of those things that I've been talking about in there before you get to actually putting a score down to somewhat justify your score. Now, we do have a scoring reference sheet, a scoring fact sheet on likelihood, because it's a bit of a tricky one. You kind of have to think about it as relative likelihood. This intersection compared to other intersections, what are the characteristics of it that make it worse or better? Kathy, any questions? And just wondering whether we take our stretch break now.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's just cover off some of these questions. They're great questions coming in. Thank you. Okay, so usually when a risk matrix is applied, it stipulates the chance of likelihood of an event happening within a set time frame. So once every year, 5 years, etc. Does the SSA matrix use this approach?
No. So the way you could think about that to a degree would be the product of all this scoring and checking that on what you believe, but nobody's categorized that. So it's not done in that sense. And part of the reason for that is the extraction of exposure from likelihood as a discrete element. Because in a standard risk matrix, you don't have that exposure. You have likelihood and severity. And within likelihood, exposure is included. So for that likelihood down here, or we might be saying that the likelihood is a 3 here, but I don't think there'll be many crashes. We're saying the chance of a crash is high if somebody actually is there, and we're saying that there's hardly anybody there. So you kind of would have to wrap those two up to get to that sort of thinking. Plus, you then have to think about, well, what are the severity of crashes, incidents that we are sort of looking at from that time perspective? Yeah, so for safe system assessing, you may look at crash history if you want, but it's more to get an idea of what road users are involved, what speeds were happening, how much inappropriate activity is associated out here, and these sorts of bits of information, not how frequently are we seeing crashes, and that's going to help me score.
Mm-hmm. Next question is there software, or do we do this manually?
Well, software is
a fancy Excel.
Yeah. We've got an Excel for you to just plug your numbers in and it spits out results and things like that. But more importantly is the word. Well, no, the numbers are pretty important, but we give you, the standard Word document requires you to just type stuff in. Kathy will show you all this shortly.
Okay. All right. Did you want to have a break at this point, Ken?
Yeah, let's just take 2 minutes so people can quickly grab a water or coffee or whatever they want, and we'll get back to it in 2 minutes.
Okay, and keep questions coming through, and there are no silly questions. They're all great. Love them. Thanks.
Okay, let's get back into it. So we've now got scores down for exposure and for likelihood, and we've justified our likelihood scores with lots of dot points about what the physical infrastructure is and what's missing and all of those sorts of things. And then we go to severity. We say, okay, now put aside the chance of a crash and how many people are exposed to it. We're assuming a crash now is happening. How bad is it going to be? What's the severity here? And we go and we say, okay, a vehicle is going to leave the road and it's going to hit something. What speed is that happening? That's going to be a big influence. What are the roadside features? Is it going to hit a barrier system? That's a crash. So, is it going to be a flexible barrier? Is it going to be a rigid barrier? Are they going to hit a pole, a tree, or a culvert, or are they just going to roll over in the roadside? They're all going to have sort of less sort of severity outcomes. And so this is where we then go over here and we look at, well, what are we saying for the severity of crashes? So let's go up to 4 again. I start at 4. Should a crash occur, it is highly likely that it will result in a fatality or serious injury to any road user involved. Kinetic energies are high enough. Kinetic energies are high enough to cause a fatal serious injury crash, and is unlikely that the forces will be dissipated before reaching the road user. So what it means by that is that the speeds are high enough, and which gives us the kinetic energy, and we're not going to dissipate them, like run them off on a barrier system or cushion that in some way or another. Okay, so this one's it. For a 3, it says, should a crash occur, it is likely that it will result in a fatality or serious injury. A 2, it is unlikely that it will result in a serious injury. So we've got highly likely. A 1, highly unlikely. And then we see a 0. Should a crash occur, there's only minimal chance of resulting in fatality or serious injury to road users involved. This might mean the kinetic energy transferred during the crash are low enough not to cause fatal or serious injury, or that it's dissipated. And then it points us at referring to safe system critical impact speeds. So this is where this comes into play. And hopefully now that's sort of become clear in your mind that the crash speed up here is going to be very important, and we've got different crash types. So leaving the road, hitting a pole or a tree here, for example, and if that happens, we're thinking in there. Now you can see that this is a bit of a graded scale. It's not a very absolute distinct, but for that, in our environment, maybe we think of it as a 3. So you can use that and you can get back and you can sort of go 3 there. Again, you would dot point out how you arrived at that. Okay. Then you go through and you look at head-on. Okay, so we're saying around the 60 km/h. Well, head-on crash, are we thinking car to car, or are we thinking car to heavy vehicle? Well, sort of up here, 70, and we're starting to, sorry, it's over here. Maybe still the 3, so there's the chance, we're going to get some serious outcomes, but you may make a judgment call to slightly vary that, but we might decide to go a 3 there as well. Intersection, well, again, we go through and we think, okay, what's the intersection? What's the angles? What's the speeds and the like? And we know that will probably come out at a 4 because it's a right angle crash, side impact crash, vehicle to vehicle. Oh no, I can go with 3 on that. I forgot I was using 60 as my example. We go with 3 on that. So you can see speed is heavily dominating this. Other, well, if we're thinking side swipe crashes, we don't really have those in this, but we know the energy on side swipe crashes are going to be fairly low. So you might be able to go there with a 2. Pedestrians and cyclists and motorcyclists, well, we know they're all going to be highly vulnerable to crashes. We're thinking about these scenarios where they're involved in that crash, and we sort of get a 4, 4, and a 4, because we're thinking about a pedestrian struck at 60 km/h. I'm pretty sure this is going to come out of 4, isn't it? Pedestrian car. Yeah, it's 3 or 4. Cyclist car still up there. Motorcyclist versus car. Okay, we might actually be able to go to a 3 on that. And again, you're just thinking about the judgment, using your judgment on these. Go to 3 on that. Okay, so you've got to this point where you've put all these numbers in, and now you're going to take those numbers and multiply them. So you multiply down, right? So we've got 12, and then we've got 6 and 7. And so you can see there, you're immediately starting to be able to see where your risk comes out. What are we at? Okay, so that immediately helps you, and then you can, what you can do, you want to get a total score, is you add up these, and you get a total score out of 448. Okay. Kathy, I'll pause there and see if there's any questions.
Yeah, I think Blair might have his hand up, so I'll just double check him there.
Yeah, thanks. I thought it would just be easier to verbally articulate what I was trying to ask rather than type a question. When you're looking at the HV percentage, you predominantly use speed to pick your numbers on that severity. For instance, that, say, pedestrian one was borderline 3 or 4. but if you have an awareness that, you know, oh, this is used more by heavy vehicles, or there's other influence that would tip you into a 4 or something like that, is that how you would sort of use that approach?
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. That's exactly it. And so if you are somebody who's done sort of other risk assessments, be that an OHS risk assessment or risk assessments for the road network and other sensors, you're kind of comfortable in sort of saying, well, is that high, medium, and you make a bit of a judgment call on that based on all the intel you've got. And it's a similar thing. So that's exactly right. You might say, well, yeah, gee, it's either a 2 or a 3, but yeah, I've seen those heavy vehicles while I've been out on site, and I'm going to go up to 3 because I think, there's a chance that this could happen, and it may be a larger vehicle and it's going to have more mass. So yeah, great point. Okay.
Ken, there's another question that's come in.
Yep.
About the subjectiveness of it and how it would be different from person to person, and would it be better in a group scenario? Yeah.
So the first thing on that is that safe system assessments are very much encouraged to be done as a team, and most of the guidelines and the requirements are that there is a team, kind of like road safety auditing, where you have a team. So there is that discussion. But you'll see shortly, the reason why we start always on a safe system assessment with the existing road environment is because it sets you a relative benchmark that then the same people have to do the assessment of each design that's proposed, because it's all off that base, because that's exactly right. There's subjectivity to especially likelihood, bit severity, and sometimes a little bit in the exposure, but yeah, it's subjective. But as long as the same team scores the existing conditions and future scenarios, we should be talking about this relative change, which should give us the same sort of outcome.
If you can't quite decide, is it a 2 or is it a 3?
Yeah.
Can you go 2.5?
Yeah, so Austroads is silent on that. And in the development of that guide, in one of the workshops, I said, we're going to put numbers to this. Sorry, I should say, there's an important aspect to us putting numbers to this. In normal risk assessments, we don't really quantify it like this. We just put, a high and it's probable and it's severe injury and it gives high risk, But this one we put numbers to it. And the reason for that is something that I haven't dwelled on, which is a 0. And if you put a 0 into any cell of this matrix, right, what does multiplying anything by 0 come out as? It comes out as a 0, of course, doesn't it? So if you have 0 exposure, so there is no intersections, well, it doesn't matter what the likelihood of intersection crash is or the severity. I mean, it's pointless. There's no intersection. Likewise, if you could hand on heart say, nobody will crash at this intersection, right? I mean, that you wouldn't do that because, you've got to take into account human failures and the like. But in theory, if you could be very confident, then you wouldn't care what the exposure is, how many people are exposed to it, or the severity, because no crashes will happen. Likewise, if we can say, well, if a crash occurs at this intersection, the speeds, passenger vehicle to passenger vehicle are going to be low enough that they're not going to seriously injure or kill anybody, and you put a 0 there, you don't actually care what the likelihood or the exposure is, because no crashes everybody that crashes is going to walk away. Now, you put a disclaimer on that one, because if you've got a 4 and a 4 and a 0, you've got, probably lots of minor little bingles going on, and you probably want to fix that. But that's not really a safe system thing, because we acknowledge that crashes are going to happen. So that use of the zero is really important in this, okay? And so that's why they put numbers to it. But then we said, well, this is going to be given to technical people. They're just going to run this just off a cliff in terms of the use of numbers. And sure enough, after a few months of safe system assessing, we started to see like 3 decimal places coming in for each of these numbers. And that's like, it's subjective. All right, you're getting these general categorizations. And also there's this other little beauty to this use of whole numbers. And that is that if you've got an area, okay, say like this, and we've got pedestrian likelihood. And the project's, solving this in their mind by putting up a pedestrian warning sign. Okay, that's not even going to be enough for me to tick over from a 3 to a 2, right? I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but I'm saying that that's not going to fix a fundamental issue, right? So actually having those, significant steps is a pretty powerful thing. But in the practice of it, there is a lot of debate between some of these numbers, and the Victorian guidance and the South Australian guidance, and it's pretty much what's used now across Australia, says that you can, if you really want to, go to a 0.5, but it's discouraged, but you can.
All right, Ken, now you took 15 minutes to tell us yes, but that's okay. It needed the explanation. Thank you. In the team, should it be multidisciplinary, traffic design, environment, etc.?
It'd be lovely if you're able to do that. That's wonderful. That can be very helpful. You can get insight. That's good.
Does the framework include a differently focused matrix for non-road based assessment, cycleways, for example?
Oh, no, you would use the same matrix. You would probably put zeros for quite a few of them. You could use the same thing. So I have done this once just to try it, recreated a new framework under the same structure of thinking for a dedicated cycleway. So it uses the same philosophy, but you just have to then go, well, this is runoff road for cyclists. This is head-ons for cyclists to cyclists, or cyclists to pedestrians. No, you wouldn't. You just do cyclist to cyclist, and then okay, we've got intersecting paths, and then that's what pedestrians being struck by cyclists, and cyclists. Well, that can go because that's not relevant anymore because we're covering the whole thing as cyclists. So you can do that if you want. It's probably worth getting somebody who's done a lot of safe system assessing to review your methodology and how you're thinking about it. But it is, in essence, just a risk assessment framework with a particular tweak and adjustment to make it safe system-y thinking. Next.
System-y, I love it. If the crash severity is 0, so only minimal chance it will result in fatality or serious injury, it seems that it would easily rule out a lot at low speeds.
Yeah, it's a pretty good reason to have low speeds. So yes.
Good. Okay, great. Carry on. Now we've got half an hour to go.
And you need time to show them through stuff. So put your seatbelt on. We're going. Okay, so just a quick sort of example. Here's an intersection. They've got some designs to upgrade this intersection. You've been asked to do a safe system assessment on it. You go out, you're looking at the existing conditions. You say, oh, okay, there you go. It's give way controlled. It's got power pole. It's got footpath. You get an idea of that, and you go, okay. They've got an idea, and they want to put a roundabout there, and they're giving you this design, and they say, here's one option we've got. And this is how the roundabout would look. Here's another option we've got, which is a modified T intersection with traffic signals. And this is the third option we've got. And here's a conventional T intersection with traffic signals and some slip lanes and the like. And so then you've gone out to that existing site and you look at it and you create your matrix, okay? So you put in there, you'll work out your traffic volumes and you put a score in. Then you'll see here that it says, increases. What has increased the likelihood of crashes? And you dot point things out there. What has decreased the likelihood of crashes? And you dot point things out there as well. And there you go. They even put a 0.5 in. Now, this is one that's just been sort of trimmed down to fit on one slide. Some of these can be, quite extensive in terms of the dot points and the information put in there. Then you go to severity and you're talking about, okay, runoff rate. What increases the severity? Okay, so you've got fixed hazards and unshielded drop-offs and these sorts of things. What decreases it? Oh, well, the speeds are relatively low. And then you put a score in and then you get your scores. And you do this for each. So you're putting in what increases, what decreases, dot, 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 dot. You go through, you fill it out. This is your existing conditions. Then what you do is once you've completed all that, you're happy with it, saying, okay, this is good. That was easy. Then you copy that, the whole table, the whole matrix. You paste it. You look at the design of the roundabout, and then you modify the existing condition. And you modify that by crossing things out that have been removed and adding things that are new. When they build this roundabout, these things will, will now occur. So you color those, you make them red and you cross bits out and you change scores if you think score should change and you change the color there and you cross this bit out. And there's some changes here, but the score stayed the same because maybe some went up, some went down. Then you go and once you're happy with all of that, you get the existing conditions again, you paste it, and you do the same for each design that they provide you. And they might provide you 5 designs, or you might just have one, but you're assessing each of those designs based off altering the existing conditions matrix. And there's another one. Then you get the ability to start comparing things. You've got the existing conditions, 118.5. The roundabout gives 90. The modified T signalized gives 99. The T intersection gives 105. And so that basically says, by them doing any of those 3 options that they put forward, they're improving their alignment with safe system principles. I didn't get to 0. So there's more that could be done, but there is an improvement. And you'd expect that. They're investing in intersection controls and features. But then what people want to see, and this is what the project control groups and project management review and people who are saying, okay, have you done a safe system assessment? Give me a look at the outputs. And they want to see this sort of thing. And that's how we've arrived then at these scores. And Kathy will show you, we've set up an Excel, so this sort of is produced for you. You'll have to do the thinking, but at least the graph will be made easy. But then, as I said, each of those, we can further improve their alignment with safe system principles, and we make these recommendations. We say, hey, we like your roundabout idea, but here are some ideas that will make it even better. Or we like your signals idea, but here are things that could make it even better. And we categorize these ideas that we come up with into either primary or supporting. Okay, and so a primary treatment, okay, don't think about that as my number one. Think about that. Think about these two as buckets. I'm going to draw a little handle on them. Okay. I'm going to take a treatment out of the primary bucket. Okay. And that could be raised crossing points at the roundabout. It could be a separated bike facility around the roundabout. It could be slowing speeds on the approach to the roundabout. It could be, any of these things. Okay. And it's planning, design, and management considerations that virtually eliminate potential for fatal or serious injury occurring in association with foreseeable crash types, or that crash type you're thinking about. So really for these, you're going to be having to still assume that crashes are going to happen, I suppose, unless you're grade separating or something like that, or completely moving the vulnerable road users off into a different area. But it's got to really either completely address exposure or severity, because the likelihood, if you're reducing the likelihood of crash, that's what we would call supporting, because we know humans are humans, and even if we get all of our infrastructure right, they're still going to make mistakes and crash sometimes. There'll be less of that happening, but then how bad is it going to be? So supporting our road planning, design, management considerations that improve the overall level of safety, but are not expected to virtually eliminate potential for fatal serious injuries occurring. So those are often, the things that I talk about as likelihood: signage, lighting, sealed shoulders, audio tactile, and speed limit reductions that don't bring us into lower tolerable levels, or you think, well, that'll help out a bit, but people still go fast. And another little one here, which doesn't come out too much, but it doesn't change the ability for a primary treatment to go in the future. I put non-safe system in here because it's sort of talked about, but you wouldn't be suggesting anything that's going to make things worse, or where it may come into play is if you're hampering the ability for a primary treatment in the future. But don't worry too much about that at this stage. Okay, so what you're going to do is you're going to look at the design. You're going to assess the existing conditions. So without them, without the design, then you're going to do a matrix for that design. Then you're going to suggest changes to that design and categorize each of those. Now, the last thing you do in a safe system assessment, or maybe it is the first thing you do, it's up to you when you actually do it in the order of it, is you go through these prompt questions. Now, these are the other elements of the safe system, and these prompt questions have been put in there by Australians. And you don't actually put numbers to this, right? You just put written answers, dot points, thought starters that may help you either adjust the scores in your matrix or may spark an idea on a new initiative that could happen associated with this project that's maybe outside of the pouring of concrete and putting in a barrier systems and the like. Okay, so the questions here are road users likely to be alert and compliant? And are there factors that might influence this? So, what are the expected compliance and enforcement levels, alcohol, drugs, road rule speeds? What's the likelihood of driver fatigue? Can enforcement be conducted safely? So that's a good one. I mean, we've had a couple of safe system assessments where we've talked to the highway patrol, rolled out the design, talked to them about what's coming. So can this be enforced? Enforced? And I said, it's very hard. You're putting a lot of barrier in there. Where do we pull over? Where do we put a number plate recognition vehicle? And then work with them. Say, well, what about this area? Could we create something there? And you can create facilities, and that's holistic safe system thinking there. That then if they're going to build $100 million road upgrade, that it's got catered, like purpose-built enforcement areas and the like. Are there special road users present? Elderly children on road activities? Are there things we should be looking at there? Then vehicles, what level of alignment is there with the ideals of safer vehicles? Well, this is a bit of an odd question. And most of the time you just go, well, it's not really applicable. You can, in theory, use the Safe System Assessment Framework on an entire community or a mine site, and that's where these sort of come into play. Other factors that might attract a large number of unsafe vehicles: is the percentage of heavy vehicles too high for the design, and is it a recreational motorcycle route? Are there resources to detect non-roadworthy overloaded vehicles? Can enforcement of this stuff be conducted safely? Has vehicle breakdown been catered for? And again, it comes out with some of the continuous barrier jobs and those sort of thinking. And then post-crash care. Yeah, are there issues that might influence safe and efficient post-crash care in the event of a severe injury? Congestion, access, motorway safe system assessments often, and this becomes quite interesting. How do you get from one side to the other and the like? Do emergency medical services operate as efficiently as possible? Well, this has in the past generated, ideas like the helicopter landing pads in these remote areas up in the mountains to extract people because there's really nowhere and it takes forever to get people. Emergency teams protected during crash event. Are drivers provided information? Is there reliable information via radio BMS? Is there provision for e-safety, cooperative intelligent transport systems and the like? Again, that one's more a community one, or I don't know, if you're doing a major new tunnel or something, you'd be thinking about some of that advanced technology and the like. Sometimes you occasionally, if it's a massive safe system assessment, need to pull in experts to help with these sorts of things. So those questions, and you just dot point answers, and it helps you thinking, and you may come up with stuff. As I said, we've done enforcement bays, we've done, different emergency access bits and pieces, different education campaigns with the local school on how to use these new areas and how to best, take advantage of these facilities and the like. So lots of good stuff. Then you write up a safe system assessment report. And I don't need to go through all this because we're going to give you a template and you just follow the template. These are things that should be included in a report, and they are in the template. And this is the template that you'll be given. And Kathy's going to do this live shortly, but anything highlighted yellow, you're going to have to fill out. So I won't go through this now, but you're going to have to do that. But I will just say that you're going to be asked to go to a site. So you're going to be given a design, and you're going to go to that site and you're going to look at it because you're going to do an assessment of the existing conditions, and then you're going to have a design and you're going to look at that and imagine it built on that site, and then you're going to assess that. So we need you wearing a high-vis vest when you're out there, and we don't want you to get on, measure lane widths or anything like that. You're just observing the area. How does it function? We've risk assessed them all. They're all low risk in that sense of you being able to stand away from traffic and look and park safely and not be a hazard yourself. Don't make people walk around you. And we do have a safe work method statement in the learning management system for you to just click that you agree to. It's pretty simple. It says you won't be drunk when you're out there, and you'll you understand that you've got to try to act safely, and we've assessed the site and those sorts of things. I think that's it, Kathy. I was a bit fast at the end there, but I did want lots of time for you to walk people through this and then for us to answer any questions that come up.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, great. So now is your chance for questions, and I will just show where you go in the system. Hold on. Okay. So once you jump into the learning management system, you've been enrolled into this one here, which is the Transport for New South Wales Module 4 and 5 only. Now I'll just take you through a couple of things. There is this resources section, and Ken talked a little bit about the Safe System Assessment Framework, and I will show you that. There's also some information here only if you want to have a look at, but there's information from other states as well. So there's TMR, and they've gone to some new level of template work, but the one that you're looking for in particular is this one here, the Safe System Assessment Framework. And that looks like this, if you haven't seen that one before. But for the assignment, you go to Module 4 and you have a look at Complete Your Safe System Assessment. And as Ken mentioned, we have allocated you all the sites. So your name is at the end of the file name here. As you can see, many have a number of people in there. That's just because you're in similar locations. So you are able to do this as a group or in pairs if you'd like. So you can organise to do that as a group. And you can write up one report together that you submit. You just need to put both or all of your names on the report. Now, if for some reason you've moved and you no longer live or work in any of the areas here, do get in touch with me and I will conjure you up a new site. So that is the design that you've been given here. And here is the template. So if you just click on that, you open it up, and as Ken mentioned, you're only needing to complete the highlighted sections. Now, this is the Vic Roads or the Department of Transport Victoria template, but it's a great template because it's got all of the juicy bits and pieces in there for you. Things that you don't have to do have been crossed out. So we've tried to make this nice and easy for you. Insert your name here or your team member's name. And the first bit you've got to do is tell us a little bit about the proposed work. So your design is telling you what the proposed work is going to be on that site. Take a snip of it and pop it in here. So you replace this particular picture in here with your one, and you also tell us what the speed limit is. Now, we don't need a big, long paragraph here, just a couple of sentences that says they're proposing a roundabout here or they're proposing something or another. This section here, you'll actually complete at the end once you've actually done your scores. So this is a bit of a summary, and you're doing a total of 2 matrices. So the first one is on the existing conditions, which is what you go out and do your site visit on. And then the next one is on that design option that we've given you in the folder. You replace this graph with the one that you've made in Excel. And here we get to the juicy bit. So this is your first matrix, and what you do is insert option here. So for the first one, you'll write in here existing conditions, and you will start to complete this matrix for the existing conditions. So the exposure is all about the numbers. And in your design option, we've given you some traffic volumes that this really is for training purposes only. So in some cases, we've made up designs or something like that. So if they don't quite align with what you know of in the local area, that's okay. Use this as a training exercise. So your numbers are in here. And that is what is going to tell you about what your exposure, comments, and scores are. So you complete that. Then you have a look at what factors increase the likelihood of crashes and what factors decrease the likelihood based on the existing conditions. So as it is at the moment. And you score each of those as well, just for the existing. I know the design is highlighted there, which is for the next bit, but just the existing part. And then you look at severity and the same again. So what factors increase severity and what factors decrease severity, and you score that across the board. You multiply it down to get a score here, and then you add these scores across to get your existing conditions score out of 448. Multiply down, add across. We all good, Ken, so far? Yeah, is everybody else good? Questions if you've got them. So you've completed your existing conditions one. Happy days. Oh, good, okay, thumbs up. You then copy that table. Oh, and Good news, here's an example right next to it. So if you get stuck, have a look at your example. It's clearly marked as an example. Just cross-check with that if you need to. Okay, so you should get your score in there for your existing conditions. You copy your existing conditions table, and then you write proposed design option 1, where it said existing conditions. Copy, paste, design option 1. This one's a traffic signals. Now, chances are, in this example here, your exposure score hasn't changed because the numbers haven't changed. I'm assuming if we don't close something or something like that, the numbers don't change. So that's nice and easy done. But your likelihood has probably changed. So as Ken mentioned, you cross things out that no longer apply with the design option, and then you add anything new in here that now will apply with your design option. Crossing things out and adding things new in red. So it's nice and easy for the reader of the report to see what's changed and what's new. And you score your design option in there. Got an example, same again, multiply down, add across, and then you've got your new score. Your design option score. That's the good stuff. Then you get to make some recommendations, I guess, or some suggestions about primary treatments and supporting treatments. And you pop these into this section here, just this part here, treatments for consideration for the project team. So they've given you one design option, and you might make some suggestions about what other things they could do. This is where that wonderful document will help you. This one here, the Safe System Assessment Framework, because around about on page 14 is usually where I go. 19, close enough. It gives you some examples of treatments for each of the columns. So you've got runoff road. The green one is primary treatments. And then the yellow and orange are all supporting treatments. They just did something funny all those years ago and gave them 2 different categories. But these are all supporting treatments. And they tell you which they influence down the side here. And you've got one of these for each column. It's not limited to just these. There might be other things in there, but it's a great thought starter in there. Back to our template. Pop those in here. You don't even have to write a conclusion. You do have to take a photo of you at the site. Replace Ken with you. Let's make new Kens, or let's make new Safe System Assessors. If you go out on site together, group selfie, love it. And that's the end. Sorry, actually, I lied. That's not the end. You've got your scores here, which you had to go back up to the start. There we go. And you pop them in here.
And you create a graph.
Oh, you create a graph. I didn't show you how to create a graph. In this one, graph generator. Here it is here. All you do is pop your numbers in there, and like magic, a graph appears. And you just have to snip that and paste it into your report.
Good.
Too easy?
Yeah. So just a couple of things I just want to reiterate there. You fill out the existing conditions matrix, you copy it, you paste it. So what's in there at the moment are examples. only. So you're not going to use those examples. Don't use those. Delete them or get rid of those. Copy the existing conditions one, paste it, and then modify it. So after you've filled it out, copy. The next one, and I'm just reeling through things here that people, what they lose marks for. The next thing is that supporting treatments, primary treatments, like that is for alterations to the design. Existing conditions, don't think about that. Think, what is this design? What could we change about it that would make it better? And write those in. And those can be supporting or primary. They're two big ones there. So this is going to actually be marked. And what we require is an 80% or above for you to successfully complete this. And, you know, because we will, at the end of this, give you a safe system assessment certificate, but you need to prove to us that, you know, you understand this concept and how it works and the like. So you're going to create that document, you're going to PDF it, and then you're going to upload it. And there's an upload button usually there, but it's not there for some reason, because Kathy's the super user or whatever.
And you've got 2 weeks. So we will meet again next Wednesday at 1 p.m. or a little bit earlier for warm-up trivia. And that gives you an opportunity in the next week, hopefully, unless it floods or other exciting things that happen nowadays, to get out there and do your site visit on the existing conditions. And once you get into this, once you start doing it, that's when the questions are going to come and how does this work? And, you know, what do I do here and that sort of thing. And so next session, we've reserved some time for questions or comments or concerns. But also if you get stuck, if you go out to do this and you just go, no, I lost it all. Please get in touch, send me an email or give us a call and we'll set up a 30-minute one-on-one session or something like that, just to run you through the bits and pieces that you might need some extra help with. And it is a learning exercise. So although Ken says, yes, it will be marked, absolutely, it will be marked, but it's all about learning how this process works. So we will give you some feedback. And if it's not quite, you know, there, or you haven't picked up some of the concepts, we will work with you to get you there. Yeah.
And if you did want to have a one-on-one session with one of our safe system assessors, might be me, might be some of my colleagues, to make sure you've got your head around it or the like, please just reach out and we'll organise that at any point as you're doing this assessment. But yeah, no, it's a bit of fun as long as you're thinking about those categorizations, looking at a design, scoring it, have a go at it. And as Kathy said, next week we've got time allocated to have those discussions. Anything else, Kathy?
There's no questions, which slightly terrifies me, but that's good. That's great. I'm sure everyone is all on top of it. Yes, so we will have one more session next week, 1 p.m. till 3 p.m. and you'll cover off some other, because you're only doing one assessment here, so you'll cover off some other, what do you call them, Ken? No, the words are failing me. And some information on OSRAP and IRAP as well.
Yeah.
Cool. Great.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.